picture the scene. It is the Roman frontier, and it's roughly 170 AD. It is damp out, it is freezing cold, and the most powerful man in the known world is currently buried under a pile of blankets.
Having a very serious, very relatable negotiation with himself.
Right. Negotiation about whether or not he actually has to get out of bed.
It is, honestly, arguably the most human moment in the entire history of philosophy.
It really is. We are back with another deep dive today, and we are unpacking Book 5 of Marcus Aurelius' Meditations. And looking at the source material here, this doesn't feel like a lecture from a marble statue at all.
No, not at all.
It feels like a pep talk for anyone who has ever wanted to just hit the snooze button and stay in the warmth, which is, all of us.
That is exactly what it is. You have the actual emperor of Rome asking himself, was I born for this, to lay me down and make much of myself in a warm bed? And the best part is that his inner voice, that part of him that just wants comfort, actually talks back. It literally says, oh, but this is pleasing.
I think we've all been there. But this deep dive isn't just about conquering morning grogginess. Looking through the notes, Book 5 seems to be the major pivot point, where Marcus moves from abstract theory into daily practice.
Yeah, it's basically a manual.
Right, a manual on how to do your job as a human being, how to deal with people who genuinely annoy you, and how to accept the things you can't control without totally losing your mind.
Exactly. If we zoom out a bit, the core mission of Book 5 is to define what it really means to live according to nature. And he doesn't mean, running off to live in a forest somewhere.
Sure.
He means fulfilling your specific design and your specific function, just like a bee or an ant fulfills theirs.
So let's go back to that argument under the blankets. Because I think his strategy for forcing himself to get up is fascinating. He doesn't just yell at himself or use sheer willpower. He tries to use logic.
He does. And he shames himself a little bit, to be honest. He looks at nature's workforce. He explicitly writes about the sparrows, the ants, the spiders, and the bees.
The busy insects.
Right. He notices that they are all intent on performing their orderly tasks. They are bringing order to the universe just by doing what they inherently are. And then he asks himself, and will not thou do that, which belongs unto a man to do?
He's basically saying, look at the ants, Marcus. They aren't complaining about the cold. Why are you so special?
Yeah.
But here is where I want to push back a little, because Marcus actually pushes back on himself in the text. He argues, but I need rest. Rest is natural too.
That is the crucial objection, and his rebuttal to his own whine is brilliant. He admits, yes, absolutely, nature sets limits on rest, just like it sets limits on eating and drinking. But then he points out this massive contradiction in human behavior.
Which is?
Well, when we eat or drink, we usually stop when we are satisfied. We hit the natural biological limit and we put the fork down.
Well, most of the time.
Fair point. But generally, we know when we are physically full, but when it comes to action, to actually doing our work, we try to stop way before we hit the limit. We try to do less than our stint. Yeah, we are constantly trying to shortchange our contribution, but we almost never try to shortchange our consumption.
That is a seriously stinging observation. We overeat, but we underwork.
Exactly. And he compares himself to mechanics or dancers to really drive the point home. He looks at people who truly, deeply love their craft. And he notes that they will pine themselves at their works, they will skip food, they will skip sleep, just because they're so obsessed with the output.
They sacrifice their basic needs for their passion.
Right. So Marcus asks himself this really tough question. Why is the dancer more disciplined than the emperor? Why are actions tending to the common good less interesting to you than a mechanic's engine is to him?
It totally reframes the idea of duty. It stops being this heavy chore imposed by a boss and starts being an expression of who you fundamentally are. But there is a trap here, isn't there?
How do you mean?
Well, in our modern context, if you work that hard, if you burn the candle at both ends like that obsessed dancer, you usually expect a reward. You want the raise, the promotion, or at the very least a thank you from your boss.
And that expectation is exactly what leads to burnout, which Marcus addresses perfectly in section 6 with the concept of the vine and the bee. This is, I would argue, essential for understanding his entire system of ethics. He breaks down 3 distinct types of people when it comes to doing good deeds.
Let's walk through those, because I think most of us fall into the first 2 categories.
We definitely do. So the first type is the transactional giver. They do you a favor, but they immediately note it in their mental ledger. They are actively keeping score. They want a return, or at least they want you to know you owe them.
The classic, I scratched your back, now you owe me type.
Right. Then there's the second type, They are a bit more subtle about it. They don't actively demand a return from you, but deep down, they still view you as a debtor.
They're secretly keeping score,
Exactly. They know exactly what they did. They are patting themselves on the back internally. They feel spiritually superior because they helped you.
which is almost worse, honestly, because it's just so smug.
Uh,
But Marcus says the ideal is the third type.
The third type is like the vine that produces grapes, or the horse after a race, or the bee making honey. When a vine produces a bunch of grapes, it doesn't ask for applause. It
Oh.
doesn't send the farmer an invoice. It just produces grapes.
Because that is simply what a vine does.
Yes. And once the fruit is born, it doesn't hang around waiting for a medal. It just gets ready to bear fruit again next season.
He uses this really great phrase in the text. He says, we should be insensible of the good we do, like a hunting dog after the hunt. They don't look around for a participation trophy. They just move on to the next thing.
That is the key insight of Section 6. True virtue is insensible of itself. It doesn't need an audience. If you are doing your job as a human, which for Marcus explicitly means helping others, that action is the reward. You are functioning as you were designed to. If you need a thank you, you are admitting that doing the right thing wasn't actually enough for you.
Okay, I get the logic. Be the bee. Produce the honey. But let's be real for a second. That is incredibly hard to do, especially when you feel like you're just not built for it. I found Section 5 really interesting because it addresses what we would probably call imposter syndrome today.
The I can't be a philosopher because I'm not smart enough to...
Yes. Yes. We often say things like, I don't have the talent for this, or I'm not witty enough to be influential.
Marcus effectively corners himself on this exact point. He admits, okay, maybe you aren't admired for your sharp, acute language. Maybe you aren't a natural-born genius. You can't necessarily change your baseline IQ. But then he drops this massive smackdown. He lists all the things you absolutely cannot blame on a lack of natural talent.
It's a laundry list. He mentions sincerity, gravity, kindness, freedom, and being content with little.
Precisely. You do not need a PhD to be sincere. You don't need a genius-level intellect to be kind or to not be greedy. He accuses himself of drooping downwards voluntarily.
Trooping downwards.
Yeah, meaning you are choosing to be lesser. He says, look, you have all these incredible virtues available to you that require zero innate talent, only effort. So you have no excuse. You can't plead natural disability for being a complainer or a flatterer. You are choosing that behavior.
So if it's a choice, how do we make the right choice consistently? Because the environment matters, right? Marcus wasn't living in a serene monastery. He was in the Roman imperial court. It was literally full of scheming, politics, backstabbing. It is really hard to be sincere and kind when everyone around you is wearing a mask.
And that is exactly where the dying the mind metaphor in section 15 comes in. This might be one of the most practical pieces of advice in the entire book. He writes, the soul receives its tincture from the fancies and imaginations.
Tincture meaning dye, right?
Yeah.
Like staining a piece of fabric.
Exactly. Imagine your mind is a piece of white cloth. Every single thought you have is a drop of dye. If you constantly think bitter, resentful, victimized thoughts, you are dyeing your mind a dark color. Eventually, that becomes the permanent color of your personality. You perceive the whole world as dark simply because you've dyed your own mind that way.
So the actionable advice here for you, listening, is that you have to actively soak your mind in good thoughts to get the right color.
Yes, you have to force it. He says you must thoroughly soak it in ideas of resilience and justice. And he specifically addresses the environment issue you brought up, the court paradox. He says, where a man can live, there he can also live well. But he must live at court.
That is such a great line. He's basically saying, if I can manage to live well in the absolute snake pit of the imperial court, you can definitely live well in your open plan office or your chaotic household.
The environment isn't a valid excuse for the color of your mind. But Marcus is also realistic. He knows we slip up, the cloth gets dirty, and in section 9, he gives us the sponge analogy to deal with that.
Oh, this one I loved. He says, when you fail to follow your philosophy, when you lose your temper or you get greedy, don't go back to your principles, like a schoolboy returning to a strict master, expecting to be whipped.
Right. Don't make philosophy a source of guilt. He says return to it like a man with sore eyes turns to a sponge and egg, or a soothing ointment.
Which was a medical treatment back then.
Exactly. Philosophy shouldn't be a burden or some show of ostentation. It should be your relief. It's the soothing medicine you go to when the world hurts your eyes.
That connects perfectly to the idea of the inner citadel, doesn't it? The idea that we have this impenetrable fortress inside us.
Yes, he brings us up in sections 2 and 16. He constantly reminds himself that external things cannot touch the soul. They literally have no access to it. The soul moves itself. If you are stressed, it's not the external event stressing you, it's your own judgment of it.
The event is outside the walls?
The event is outside, the stress is inside the fortress. If you change the judgment, the stress simply evaporates. Peace is easy to find if you just banish those turbulent, adventitious imaginations.
Speaking of judgments, let's talk about obstacles. Because sometimes the external thing isn't just an event, it's a person actively standing in your way. Section 17 is just an absolute masterclass in the mindset pivot.
This is the famous Stoic pivot. He acknowledges that people are nearest to us because our primary job is to help them. But the moment they oppose us, the moment they block our path, they immediately become indifferent things.
Indifferent like the weather.
Exactly like the weather. He compares a person blocking you to the wind, or a wild beast, or the sun. It's just a force of nature. You don't get angry at the wind for blowing in your face, so why would you get angry at a person for being difficult?
But he takes it a step further than just ignoring them. He says the mind can actually convert the obstacle.
What before was the impediment is now the principal object. That is the quote. If someone blocks your path, your new goal isn't get to the original destination. Your new goal is practice patience with this person. The obstacle becomes the fuel. That which stands in the way becomes the readiest way.
Which leads him to this really intense self-audit in section 11. He asks, whose soul do I possess right now?
Yeah, he forces himself to check in. Am I acting with the soul of a child, a tyrant, a brute, a wild beast? You have to audit yourself constantly.
And I want to touch on section 12.
Yeah.
Because it shows a side of Marcus we rarely see. Humor. He's taking a shot at what the vulgar consider to be the highest good, which is wealth and luxury. And he references a comedy play.
It's a surprisingly crude joke for a Roman emperor. He mentions a line from a stage comedy where rich people are mocked because they possess absolutely everything, yet, and I'm quoting the source material directly here, they have not so much as a place where to avoid their excrements.
That is vivid. Basically, you're so insanely rich and surrounded by so much luxurious stuff that you don't even have a place to go to the bathroom.
It highlights the total absurdity of hoarding material goods. He's stripping away the varnish. Real goods are things like prudence and temperance. Material goods are just merrily spoken of as props on a stage. Think about it. If you have so much stuff, it complicates your basic biological functions. Are you really winning at life?
That brings us to probably the most relatable part of the entire book, dealing with annoying people. Section 22 might actually be my favorite, the smelly neighbor.
It is so specific. He writes about how to deal with someone who has bad breath or smelly armpits.
But he treats it like a physics problem. That's what stood out to me so much.
That is the ultimate view from above. He asks, what can he do, given his biology? That smell must proceed from those armpits. It's a basic natural cause and effect. Getting angry at a man for smelling bad is exactly like getting angry at a fire for creating smoke. It's literally in the nature of the thing.
So if you can't be angry, what do you do? Just hold your breath and suffer.
No, he says use your reasonable faculty. Admonish him kindly. Talk to him. If he listens, great, you've cured him. If not, well, getting angry won't make him smell any better. He literally says, no need for drama.
But sometimes it's not just a bad smell. Sometimes people are actually wicked. Section 16 says, expecting a wicked man not to do wicked things is madness. It's asking for the impossible.
It's like expecting a fig tree not to produce figs. If a man has a corrupt character, he will predictably produce corrupt actions. To be surprised by it is entirely your own fault. You should have known better. You are the one who was mistaken if you expected a different result from a wicked person.
But there is a limit, isn't there? Sometimes the environment is just too toxic to endure. He talks about living among roarers and harlots in section 23.
Yeah, the roarer refers to a tragedian or a really loud actor, basically someone creating unnecessary constant drama. Marcus uses a really powerful smoke metaphor here. He says, here is a smoke, I will out of it.
Meaning I'm out of here.
Meaning you always, always have an exit. If the house is too smoky, you walk out the door. You are free to leave life if dignity is completely impossible. But, he says, try to live free within it first. Don't let the smoke suffocate you while you're still in the room.
He also helps us gain perspective by comparing our super serious adult struggles to children's games. In section 27, he talks about puppies biting each other.
And children laughing and then crying the very next minute over nothing. In section 29, he uses the image of a rhombus, which was a spinning rattle toy that kids played with. He says public opinion and fame are just rattles.
So when we see people fighting on social media or totally freaking out about the latest public scandal.
It's just children crying because someone took their rattle. Marcus says, whatever you do, don't be the fool who joins in the bawling just because everyone else is upset about it. It's a toy. It fundamentally does not matter.
So we have dealt with laziness, we've dealt with annoying neighbors, and the vanity of wealth. Now we have to talk about the really heavy stuff. Fate, bad luck, death. Section 8 has a metaphor about a doctor that I think is incredibly helpful for processing tragedy.
This is one of the most comforting concepts in the book, but it requires a massive shift in how we view the universe. He compares fate itself to a physician.
Walk us through that.
Well, think about it. When a doctor prescribes you bitter medicine or tells you to sit in an ice-cold bath or walk barefoot, you do it. You might hate the taste, you might hate the cold, but you do it anyway. Why?
Because I want to get healthy.
Exactly. You accept the suffering because you know it's necessary for the overall health of your body. Marcus argues that we should view things like blindness or some loss or damage in the exact same way. It is a prescription from the nature of the universe.
So if I lose my job or I get sick, that is the prescription.
Yes, fate is the physician. And if fate prescribes you a severe hardship, it is because that specific event is necessary for the health of the whole universe.
That is a really tough pill to swallow. It requires you to truly believe that your personal suffering has a larger function.
It does. He uses the Greek word symbanein. It is usually translated simply as to happen, but literally it means to fit together, like square stones in a masonry wall. Your personal hardships are the stones that fit into the massive wall of destiny to make the entire structure stand. If you reject your fate, if you complain, you are actively trying to break the wall. You are becoming a tumor on the world rather than a harmonious part of it.
And eventually that wall comes down for all of us. Section 4 and 13 talk about the great recycling.
It's a very grounding, almost scientific view of death. He says we will soon breathe our last breath back into the air that fed us. Our bodies will fall to the earth that gave us food.
Just a transformation.
Exactly. Our substance is never destroyed. It's just recycled in infinitum into the universe. We are just parts of the universe constantly being rearranged.
It makes death feel a lot less like a terrifying ending and more like a natural process.
It completely removes the fear. In section 19 and 27, he talks about time's flux. Things are carried away like a flood. We are just ashes or a skeleton, and soon we're just a name, or maybe not even a name, just an empty sound. He asks, what is it that thou dost stay for? Why are you clinging so desperately to this life? The only thing that actually matters is how you behave while you are here.
There is a moment of real simplicity in section 7 that reflects that. The Athenian prayer. He quotes them saying, "O rain, rain, good Jupiter, upon all the grounds."
That stands out so much because it's entirely unselfish. Usually people pray for my win, my safety, my harvest, but the Athenians prayed for rain on all the fields, even their neighbors. Marcus says pray simply and freely for the common good like that, or just don't pray at all.
So let's bring this all together. What is the ultimate takeaway from Book 5? It all starts with the alarm clock.
It starts with the harsh realization that you have a job to do. You are a human being, not a pet meant to be kept warm. Your job is to work with others and to contribute. When obstacles hit you, whether it's a smelly neighbor or a tragic loss, you don't whine. You treat the neighbor as a test of patience and the loss as a necessary prescription for your character.
And you stop keeping score. You become the bee. You make the honey simply because that's what bees do, not because you want a thank you note.
Precisely. And I think we should end with the definition of a happy lot from section 30. We tend to think a happy lot in life means winning the lottery or just having an easy, pain-free existence.
But Marcus says he is a happy man who in his lifetime dealeth unto himself a happy lot.
You deal your own hand. You do not wait for luck to grant it to you. And a happy lot is defined incredibly simply. It is good inclinations of the soul, good desires, and good actions. That is it. That is the only thing truly within your power.
And here's a final provocative thought to leave you with for everyone listening. In section 25, Marcus conducts a final audit on himself. He imagines his death and asks, "The legend of thy life is full." If your story ended right now, today, how would you answer his audit? Have you behaved effectively toward your friends, your family, and even the perverse, unreasonable men in your life?
Is your story actually complete? Or are you still hiding under the blankets?
Something to really mull over the next time you hit snooze.
Ooh.
Thanks for diving in with us.